Single dad texted, "I love you" to boss by mistake. She showed up and whispered this. Mark Hale realized he'd made a mistake 3 seconds too late. The message sat there on his phone screen, painfully innocent and disastrously out of place. "I love you. Sweet dreams, starshine. Dad's always right here." Delivered. Read. His stomach dropped so fast it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Mark stared at the name above the message, hoping, irrationally, that it would rearrange itself into something else. It didn't. Eleanor Cross. CEO. Founder. His boss. Not his 8-year-old daughter, Rosie. Mark exhaled sharply and dragged a hand down his face, his fingers trembling. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, brain scrambling for words that could somehow undo what had already happened. An explanation. An apology. A miracle. Before he could type anything, the phone buzzed again. One new message. Mark. I believe this message was not intended for me. That was it. No emoji. No punctuation beyond a period. No warmth. Just clarity. Mark closed his eyes and let his forehead rest against the edge of the kitchen counter. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh no, no, no." The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock Rosie had insisted on hanging crooked above the sink. A unicorn sticker clung stubbornly to its side. Rosie was already asleep in her room, curled around the stuffed fox she'd named Captain Brave. Mark had read her 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web, kissed her forehead and, out of habit, sent the text he had sent every night since her mother died. Only tonight, exhaustion and divided attention had betrayed him. Now the most powerful woman he knew had just received words never meant for her eyes. Words that belonged to his daughter. And worse, words that revealed something he worked very hard to keep private. Well, softness. Meat. There was a reason he kept his life carefully separated. At 41, Mark was a widower, a project director at Cross and Hale Consulting, and the sole parent to a child who had already lost too much. His days were measured in meetings and deadlines, his nights in spelling words and bedtime fears. Eleanor Cross existed in an entirely different universe. She was composed precision in a tailored blazer. A voice that never wavered. A woman whose approval could move markets. And now she knew he ended his nights with tenderness. Mark typed quickly. "I'm so sorry. That message was meant for my daughter. I wasn't paying attention." He stared at the text for a long moment before hitting send. The 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, understood. "We'll speak tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word echoed ominously. Mark locked his phone and leaned back against the counter, breathing slowly until his pulse settled. He glanced down the hallway toward Rosie's room, reassured by the faint glow of her night light spilling under the door. She was safe. She was loved. Even if tomorrow at work was going to be unbearable. Sleep barely came. When it did, it was shallow and restless, dreams filled with conference rooms and unreadable expressions. Morning arrived too soon. "Dad." Rosie's small voice drifted into the kitchen as Mark stared blankly at his coffee, still in yesterday's mug. "You forgot to add milk." He blinked and looked down, then smiled weakly. "Good catch, Starshine." Rosie climbed onto her chair, her dark curls a tangled halo around her face. She studied him the way she always did when something felt off. "You look tired." "Just thinking about work." She frowned. "Work makes you do that face a lot." "What face?" "That one." She mimicked his tight expression, lips pressed together in exaggerated seriousness. Mark laughed despite himself. "I'll try to do a happier one." Rosie nodded solemnly, satisfied. "Mom said when things feel scary, it helps to remember who you're doing it for." Mark's chest tightened. "What were we doing it for?" he asked quietly. "For love," Rosie said easily. "And for each other." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It was a small thing. It always was. And it always saved him. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than usual. Mark straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and rehearsed neutral professionalism like armor. Cross and Hale's headquarters gleamed with glass and steel, clean lines, muted colors, efficiency baked into every corner. Eleanor Cross's office sat at the end of the executive corridor. Her assistant gave him a brief nod. "She's expecting you." Of course she was. Mark knocked once and entered. Eleanor stood near the window, backlit by the city skyline. Her posture was perfect, hands loosely folded, expression unreadable. "Mark," she said. "Close the door." His heart thudded. "Yes, ma'am." She turned, dark eyes steady. She wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. "I want to be clear," Eleanor said calmly. Your message last night was inappropriate only in its destination, not its content. Mark swallowed. I understand. And I sincerely apologize. She studied him for a moment longer than necessary. Then, unexpectedly, she said, How old is your daughter? 8. Pause. You send her that message every night? Yes, Mark answered before thinking. Since my wife passed. It helps her sleep. Something shifted. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. Eleanor nodded once. Thank you for clarifying. She moved back toward her desk, professional walls snapping back into place. This stays between us. Your work speaks for itself. I don't intend to let a personal moment define you. Relief hit him so hard his knees almost buckled. Thank you, he said quietly. As he turned to leave, Eleanor spoke again, softer this time. She's lucky. Mark paused, hand on the door. Yes, he said. I am. That should have been the end of it. A moment of embarrassment. A private kindness. Then back to business. But that afternoon, Eleanor Cross showed up outside Mark's office with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him. Milk. 1 sugar, she said. Exactly how he took it. I thought you might need this today. Mark stared at the cup, then at her. And for the first time he noticed something beneath the steel and polish. Loneliness. Quiet. Contained. Unspoken. Thank you, he said. Eleanor hesitated, then leaned slightly closer and lowered her voice. You didn't do anything wrong, she said. And sometimes, the right words just land in the wrong place. Then she turned and walked away. Mark sat there long after she was gone, coffee cooling in his hands. Heart steady. Mind racing. Because for the first time since his wife died, something unexpected had happened. Someone had seen him. Not as an employee. Not as a liability. But as a father. And somewhere deep inside, something long dormant stirred. If this story made you feel calm, seen, or quietly hopeful, subscribe to the channel for next part, where a work crisis forces Mark and Eleanor into unexpected closeness, and Rosie begins to ask questions no adult is ready to answer. This is a story about love that waits, not rushes. And we're just getting started. Mark didn't expect Eleanor Cross to remember the text. He expected, hoped, it would dissolve into the background noise of deadlines and quarterly reviews. But 3 days later, she stood at the head of the glass-walled conference room, fingers resting on the table, eyes locked on him. We have a problem, she said. The room went silent. Mark straightened in his chair. With which account? Westbridge Healthcare. A low murmur rippled around the table. That's impossible, someone said. They just renewed. They're pulling out, Eleanor replied. Effective immediately. Mark frowned. Why? They were acquired yesterday. New leadership. New priorities. So we renegotiate, Mark said. Eleanor nodded once. We try. They've agreed to an emergency strategy meeting. When? Tomorrow morning. Mark exhaled slowly. That's tight. It gets tighter, Eleanor said. They want it in person. Silence again. Mark checked the time on his watch automatically, brain already calculating. Tomorrow morning meant overnight travel. Which meant Rosie. I can go, someone else offered. Eleanor shook her head. They requested Mark. All eyes turned to him. Mark swallowed. I can make it work. Eleanor's gaze sharpened slightly. Are you sure? He hesitated just a fraction. Enough that she noticed. Yes, he said. I'm sure. He wasn't. That night, Mark stood in the doorway of Rosie's bedroom watching her color on the floor, tongue peeking out in concentration. Hey, Starshine. She looked up. Hi, Dad. You're home early. I am. He sat beside her. I need to talk to you about something. Her marker paused mid-stroke. That usually means big feelings. Mark smiled weakly. You're not wrong. He took a breath. I might have to go on a short work trip. Rosie's eyes flicked up. Like, overnight? Yes. Her shoulders dropped. For how long? Just one night. Maybe 2. She pressed her lips together. I don't like when you're not here. I know. Who will do the goodnight text? I will, he said quickly. No matter where I am. She studied his face. Promise? I promise. She nodded, then asked softly, will your boss be there? Mark blinked. Why do you ask? She came by your office, didn't she? His eyebrows rose. How do you? I saw her once, Rosie said. At the Christmas party. She was tall and looked serious. That's accurate. She looked lonely. The words landed heavier than expected. Why do you think that? Rosie shrugged. Some people smile with their mouths. Some people smile with their eyes. She didn't smile with either. Mark didn't know what to say to that. The flight was delayed. Mark paced the terminal, phone pressed to his ear. I'm sorry, he said. I know it's short notice. Rosie's babysitter, Mrs. Alvarez, laughed gently. Mark, I raised 3 boys. One night won't break her. I'll be back tomorrow night. She'll be fine. I owe you. You owe me nothing. He ended the call and exhaled. Everything okay? Mark turned. Eleanor stood beside him, coat draped neatly over her arm. You're on this flight too? She nodded. They changed my schedule last minute. Oh. Pause. You don't have to justify it, Eleanor said quietly. Justify what? The hesitation earlier. Mark looked away. I don't like leaving her. That doesn't make you weak. He glanced at her. Most people don't see it that way. I'm not most people, she said. They boarded in silence. On the plane, Eleanor surprised him by taking the seat beside his. Do you mind? She asked. No, they sat quietly as the plane ascended. After a while, Eleanor spoke. My mother used to leave for days at a time. Mark turned to her. She worked wherever she could, Eleanor continued. Sometimes she wouldn't come home until after I was asleep. How did that make you feel? She considered. Safe and unsafe. Both at once. That's exactly it. She nodded. You're doing better than you think. The meeting ran long. Tense. Mark argued numbers. Eleanor argued vision. When it ended, Westbridge agreed to reconsider, on one condition. They want a revised proposal by morning, Eleanor said as they walked back to the hotel. Mark groaned. Morning as in, 8 a.m. He ran a hand through his hair. That's impossible. It's not, Eleanor said. It's just uncomfortable. They worked until midnight. Side by side. Coffee cups empty. Jackets off. Sleeves rolled. At one point Mark laughed softly. What? I just realized, this is the first time I've worked past 10 since Rosie was born. Eleanor looked at him. And I don't hate it. She smiled faintly. That's growth. At 12:47 a.m. his phone buzzed. Rosie. He answered immediately. Dad. I'm here. I couldn't sleep. I know. Can you tell me a story? He glanced at Eleanor. She nodded. Take your time. Mark turned slightly away. Once upon a time, he said softly, there was a fox named Captain Brave. When he hung up, Eleanor spoke. You don't compartmentalize, she said. No, Mark replied. I integrate. That's rare. So I've been told. She hesitated. Do you ever feel like you're not allowed to want more? Yes. Their eyes met. The silence between them was full, not awkward. The next morning they won. Westbridge stayed. On the flight home, Eleanor watched Mark text Rosie. Good night, he murmured. She's lucky, Eleanor said again. Mark smiled. So are you. She blinked. Am I? You get to matter to more people than you think. She looked out the window. Later that week, Eleanor showed up at Mark's apartment door. Unannounced. Holding a paper bag. I brought dinner, she said. Rosie peeked around Mark's leg. That's my boss, Mark explained. Oh, Rosie said seriously. You look different without your serious face. Eleanor laughed, actually laughed. I'm working on that. They ate together. Talk. Listen. Afterward, as Eleanor stood to leave, she leaned in and whispered to Mark, Thank you for letting me be human. If this part made you feel closer to these characters, subscribe to the channel for what's coming next, where an anniversary brings buried grief to the surface, and Eleanor must decide what she's willing to risk. This story is about love that grows quietly and stays. The date was circled on the calendar in black ink. Not red. Not bold. Just there. Mark noticed it every morning when he packed Rosie's lunch. April 12th. He didn't tell anyone what it meant. He never did. Rosie didn't need reminding. And the rest of the world didn't need explaining. Some grief lived better in silence. That morning, Rosie watched him tie his shoes by the door. You're quiet, she said. I am? Yes. Like when it rains but the thunder doesn't come. Mark smiled faintly. That's very specific. She shrugged. Mom used to get quiet like that. His hand stilled. Rosie walked closer. Is today one of the days you miss her extra? He swallowed. Yes. She nodded like she already knew. Me too. They stood there for a moment. Then Rosie hugged him around the middle. You don't have to be strong all the time, she said. Mom said strong people rest too. Mark closed his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. At work, Eleanor noticed immediately. Mark didn't laugh during the morning meeting. Didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. Afterward, she stopped him in the hallway. Walk with me. He did. You're distracted, she said. I'm fine. You're not, Eleanor replied calmly. And you don't lie well. Mark exhaled. It's an anniversary. She slowed her steps. Of my wife's death. Eleanor didn't say I'm sorry right away. She waited. How long? She asked instead. 6 years. And you still came to work. Mark gave a humorless smile. Life doesn't pause. It should, Eleanor said quietly. Sometimes. He looked at her, surprised. You don't have to explain anything, she added. But if you need time, I don't want time, he said. I want normal. Eleanor nodded. That makes sense. They stood there, the hallway empty around them. Then Eleanor said, if it helps, I'll be nearby today. He didn't ask what she meant. Somehow he understood. That evening, Mark and Rosie went to the cemetery. They always did. Rosie placed fresh daisies carefully, arranging them just right. She liked yellow, Rosie said. I know. She also liked when you sang off-key. Mark laughed softly. That's debatable. Rosie smiled, then grew serious. Dad. Yes, Starshine. Is it okay if people love you again? The question stole his breath. Why do you ask that? Rosie traced the stone with her finger. Because Mom loved you. And if someone else loves you too, I think she'd be happy. Mark crouched down, eye level with her. It's okay to miss someone and still let new people care, Rosie continued. They don't cancel each other out. He stared at his daughter. 8 years old. And wiser than most adults. Who told you that? He asked. Rosie shrugged. I just feel it. That night, after Rosie fell asleep, Mark sat alone on the couch. Lights off. Phone in hand. He didn't know why he opened the messages. But there it was. The text. The mistake. The beginning. He hadn't meant to fall into anything. Hadn't planned on change. The knock at the door startled him. He frowned, checked the time. 9:14 p.m. He opened the door cautiously. Eleanor stood there. No blazer. No heels. Just a soft coat, hair pulled back, eyes uncertain. I hope this isn't inappropriate, she said. You didn't answer your phone. I didn't hear it, Mark replied, stunned. Is everything okay? Yes. No. She paused. I remembered the date. His throat tightened. You remembered? You told me once, she said. In passing. I didn't forget. He stepped aside. Come in. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first. Silence stretched. Then Eleanor spoke. I didn't come to fix anything. Good, Mark said quietly. Because nothing's broken. It just hurts. She nodded. Grief doesn't need solutions. Just witnesses. He looked at her. How do you know that? Eleanor folded her hands. Because I've been avoiding mine for years. Mark leaned back. Tell me. She hesitated. Then, I was engaged. He waited. We were supposed to have children, she continued. I kept saying, after the next milestone. He stopped believing me. That must have been hard. It was, she said. But what hurt more was realizing I'd trained myself not to want things. Mark studied her face. You want things? She smiled sadly. I'm learning that. They sat quietly. Then Eleanor spoke again. You love your wife very much. Yes. And you're afraid moving forward will erase her. Yes. She turned to him fully. It won't. He closed his eyes. How can you be sure? Because love isn't a limited resource, she said softly. It expands. It adapts. It makes room. Tears slipped down his face. He didn't wipe them away. Eleanor didn't either. She just stayed. Later, Rosie padded into the living room in pajamas. She froze when she saw Eleanor. Oh, Rosie said. Hi. Eleanor smiled gently. Hi, Rosie. Rosie looked at Mark. Is everything okay? Yes, he said. It is. Rosie climbed onto the couch between them. She yawned. I had a dream about Mom. Eleanor's breath caught, but she stayed quiet. She told me to tell you something, Rosie said sleepily. Mark's voice shook. What did she say? That love doesn't end, Rosie murmured. It just changes shape. Mark reached for Eleanor's hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. That night, after Rosie fell asleep again, Eleanor stood to leave. I should go, she said. Mark walked her to the door. Thank you, he said, for coming. She hesitated. Mark, I don't want to rush anything. I don't either. But I want you to know, Eleanor continued, voice barely above a whisper, I'm not here out of curiosity. I'm here because I care. He nodded. That's enough. At the door, she leaned in and whispered, You're allowed to be happy. Then she left. Mark stood there long after, hands still warm where hers had been. The offer came on a Tuesday. Eleanor didn't announce it in a meeting. Didn't slide a folder across the table with a practiced smile. She asked Mark to stay after hours. The office was quiet when she finally spoke. They want me in New York, she said. Mark didn't respond right away. How long, he asked. At least 3 years. Possibly more. That's big. It is. She looked at him carefully. I haven't accepted. Mark let out a breath. Why not? Because before I would have said yes without thinking, she said. And now, I'm thinking. He nodded. What are you thinking about? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Then, you, Rosie. The life I didn't know I was allowed to want. Mark swallowed. You shouldn't give up your career. I'm not, she said calmly. I'm redefining it. Silence settled between them. I don't want to be the reason you stay, Mark said. You're not, Eleanor replied. You're the reason I finally questioned why I was always leaving. That night Mark told Rosie. She listened quietly, legs tucked under her. Does that mean Eleanor is moving away? She asked. Maybe. Rosie frowned. Do you want her to? No, Rosie nodded. Then maybe she shouldn't. Mark smiled sadly. It's not that simple, Starshine. Rosie considered this. Grown-ups make things hard, she said. Kids just tell the truth. What's the truth? Mark asked. That we like her, Rosie said. And she looks at you like she's not lonely anymore. Mark's chest tightened. A week later, Eleanor came over for dinner. Not formally. Not planned. She brought takeout and dessert Rosie liked. At the table, Rosie watched them carefully. So, Rosie said, sipping her juice, are you leaving us? Eleanor paused. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. Rosie nodded. Okay. Mark shot Rosie a look. That's it. Rosie shrugged. I trust you to decide the right thing. Eleanor smiled softly. That's a lot of faith. Rosie grinned. Dad says trust is love without fear. Mark blinked. I never said that. You did, Rosie insisted. Just not with words. After Rosie went to bed, Eleanor and Mark sat on the porch. Cool air. Quiet street. I'm afraid, Eleanor admitted. Of what? That if I choose this life, I'll disappoint the version of myself I spent years becoming. Mark leaned back. And if you don't? I'll regret not choosing the version of myself I'm just meeting. He turned to her. That version seems brave. She smiled faintly. She's terrified. That's how you know it matters. The next day, Eleanor declined the New York offer. Not impulsively. Deliberately. She submitted a proposal instead, remote leadership, restructuring, presence without disappearance. The board resisted. She stood firm. I won't build success at the expense of human connection anymore, she told them. I'm done pretending those are opposites. They listened. They agreed. For the first time in her career, Eleanor didn't feel hollow after winning. Mark found out the following evening. You stayed, he said quietly. I did. For us. For me, she corrected gently. You're part of that. He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Eleanor, I need to say something. She waited. I don't want to rush. I don't want to replace. I don't want to forget. You won't, she said. And I wouldn't ask you to. He exhaled. Then I want to try. Her voice softened. So do I. Weeks passed. Slow. Intentional. They cooked together. Walked Rosie to school. Shared stories that hurt and healed. One night, Eleanor stood in Mark's kitchen, holding a framed photo. She's beautiful, Eleanor said. She was, Mark replied. Do you still talk to her? Sometimes. What do you say? That I hope she'd be proud. Eleanor nodded. I think she would be. Mark looked at her. You don't feel like an intruder? No, Eleanor said gently. I feel like a continuation. His eyes filled. On the anniversary of the text, the mistake, they sat together on the couch. Rosie asleep upstairs. Mark turned to Eleanor. You never told me what you thought when you read it. She smiled. I thought, someone loves deeply. And I want to know him. He laughed softly. I was terrified. I know. And now, Eleanor said, reaching for his hand, I'm grateful. He leaned in slowly. She met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, unrushed. Later, Rosie found them holding hands. She grinned. Took you long enough. Mark laughed. You knew. I always know, Rosie said. Love feels warm before it looks obvious. The final image came quietly. A Sunday morning. Pancakes. Laughter. Eleanor stood at the stove. Mark poured coffee. Rosie danced in socks. Belonging. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. If this story made you feel safe, seen, or quietly hopeful again, subscribe to the channel for more stories about love after loss, chosen family, and healing that doesn't erase the past. It honors it. Your support means a world to us. Some mistakes are just love taking a longer way home.